The Parra podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Eels Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Parra podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Parra podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Parra Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to the Parra podcast. And look, round one is done and dusted for the Parramatta Eels with a 26 points to 8 victory over the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. Played in front of a crowd of 29,171 at Commbank Stadium. Now, look, this is a record-breaking crowd, and when I say a record-breaking crowd, it is a record-breaking crowd for a non-finals game at Commbank Stadium, with the record being the final between the Parramatta Eels and the Brisbane Broncos, which was won 58 points to nil, if you can remember that one. That was a crowd figure of 29,372, which is actually the ground record. And on Saturday, the game against the Bulldogs was 29,171. So kudos to the fans, members and members of the Parramatta Eels, and also the fans of the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs that turned up to help create that record as well. So it even outdid the opening game at Commbank Stadium, Eels Tigers on a Easter Monday of 29,047. And even last year, the game against the Bulldogs was 27,655. So a great way to start off the year for the Eels in crowd figures. Definitely very good atmosphere there at Commbank Stadium. It is great when it is packed full. You see nothing but fans in the stands, and look, it looked great, that's for sure. It was loud, people were cheering, and look, it's a great stadium. I think the best rectangular stadium in Australia, but you've probably heard me say that on many occasion, and I won't change my mind on that one. People say Suncorp Stadium. Yes, Suncorp Stadium is very good, and I've compared Commbank Stadium to a mini sort of Suncorp Stadium, as Suncorp holds 52,500, I think the capacity is there. So a very good ground, Suncorp as well, but for a boutique stadium, I think Commbank Stadium is the best rectangular stadium in Australia. But now to the game. The Eels get the victory, 26 points to 8, and start off their season in a winning way. And after the round has been completed, currently sit in third position on the ladder behind the Cowboys and the Dragons. So already it is a different start to last season. Obviously last season going down to the Melbourne Storm in round one at Commbank Stadium in Golden Point. So look, already it's a different start, and as I've said plenty of times, the Eels will want to make amends for last season, 2023, of not making the final. So this is the perfect way to start off the year against the arch rivals, the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, who had a lot of, I guess you could call it, sort of expectation going into the second year of Cameron Ciraldo coaching them. New recruit and now captain Stephen Crichton as well, bringing his experience to the team as well, and look, a few other players as well in that side. So look, I think it was there was a lot of expectation, I think, on those Bulldogs players. Just having those different team, a different team to what they had previously. Blake Taaffe at fullback, Jacob Carraz moved into the centres. Obviously, he's not a new player. He's been at the Bulldogs for a couple of years. Stephen Crichton, the captain from Penrith. Drew Hutchinson from the Roosters. So they had a few. Jamin Salmon as well. Kurt Mann. Josh Curran, just to name a few more. So they had a few players making their debut for the Bulldogs. I think about 5 for the Bulldogs making their debut for them. I think it was only 2 for Parramatta, Morgan Harper and Kelma Tuilagi. Morgan starting in the centres and actually scored the first try off a Dylan Brown grubber kick, a short grubber kick into the in goal, scoring the first try. And Kelma off the interchange bench for the Eels. So, it was always going to be a great game. 2 traditional rivals from 40 years ago. And, every time these 2 teams play, they definitely hate each other, the fans. When you ask most of the Bulldogs fans who they want to beat in the competition when they play each other, it's always Parramatta. When you ask most Eels fans who do they really want to beat, each time they play, it's the Bulldogs. For me personally, being a Parramatta fan living in Penrith, I think it's the Penrith rivalry. So that's next week's game against the Panthers that I'm really looking forward to. But majority of fans would say the Bulldogs, just because of that long-standing rivalry. To the game. It was a very stop-starty sort of game. I think the Eels, they held out the Bulldogs for 65 minutes. Early on, the Parramatta scored a try, as I said, to Morgan Harper, his first Eels try off a Dylan Brown kick into the in goal. It looked like it nearly went out, but he just got the ball in just before the dead ball line. Previous to that, Bryce Cartwright was penalty for has been put on report for a shoulder charge on Josh Addo-Carr. I don't think there'll be much to answer for that. To be honest, I think it should be okay, and I think Bryce will be playing against his former club, the Panthers, this week up in Penrith. So Morgan Harper gets the first try. Mitchell Moses converted that. Mitchell Moses suffered a bit of a groin strain, I guess you could call it. And he was in a bit of pain, bit of discomfort throughout the game. We saw Dylan Brown and Clint Gutherson take most of the kicking role throughout the game, just to take that pressure off Mitchell Moses and him with that groin injury. I was actually a bit surprised that he stayed on the field for as long as he did stay on the field for. I thought maybe with a 20-point lead, I thought maybe he potentially could have come off. We may have seen Brendan Hands come on at 5'8", and maybe Dylan go into halfback, or even Dylan stay where he was and Brendan Hands go into halfback, because I dare say that both of those players have played that position before. Dylan probably not as good a halfback as he is a 5'8", so maybe Hands go into the halfback role, being 20 odd points in front, but that wasn't the way to be. Mitchell played the whole game, and to me, it doesn't look so. Well, I don't know, because I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, but from what I'm seeing on the field and from what I saw him play the whole game, he was in discomfort throughout the game, but I think it'll either be one of two things. I think it'll be left up to him whether he wants to play against Penrith this week. And I dare say that he would love to play against Penrith. He didn't play last year in the last game against them, and also just that rivalry of losing the 2022 grand final, and even games in recent years against the Panthers as well. So I dare say he will want to play. I think if it was a major groin injury, I think you would have definitely seen Mitchell come off the field and rest that for potentially playing this week. So, I think he'll be right for this week. I think he will play. He will definitely be named anyway on Tuesday, and I will let you know on Team List Tuesday when I do the NRL tips, my tipping podcast for the week. So, stay tuned for that one. But he stayed on the field. As I said, Mitchell and Gutho took most of the kicking role. Very interesting thought for me, and one that I probably thought was probably the right decision. Junior Paolo started off the bench, came on after 19 minutes and replaced Joe Offahengawi, who started the game. He was named on the bench. Look, I think that's a good move. I've said it for a long while now. I think with RCG and Junior starting the game, I think when you eventually do take both of those players off 20 between the 20 and 30 minute mark, I think Parramatta lose a little bit of momentum. So look, it was great to see Junior start off the bench, and we probably didn't lose a lot of momentum throughout the game with him starting on the bench and Regan going off off the field at the same time, or off the field for a bit of a break. So look, it was, as I said, 65 minutes. It was a long, hard game. Bryce Cartwright got the second try for the Parramatta Eels. It was a great dummy half pass from Joey Lussick, who also had a pretty reasonable game. He probably, in my opinion, maybe stayed on the field for a little bit longer than possibly what I thought he would have. Brendan Hands didn't play that many minutes during the game, and I thought he probably would have stayed on, not played as many minutes as what I thought he would have. But he did come up with a great 40-20, and that was a great, I guess you could call it a little bit of a momentum thing, and you could see that himself and his teammates were really pumped up about that kick, that 40-20 kick, because, as I said, it was a great kick and a bit of a momentum changer. Brendan Hands, he played 17 minutes throughout the game, so I thought he might have got a lot more minutes than that. Joey Lussick got 63 minutes, and I thought he might have got a lot less than that, but it wasn't to be. But it was good to see Brad Arthur use his entire bench. We saw last year during games that 3 players were getting used and 1 wasn't getting used at all. So it was good to see that he used his whole bench. Not that I'm a coach or anything, but so I don't understand the tactics, but he knows better than I do. Look, going into the game, Bailey Simonson was named on the wing. I thought maybe potentially what I would have done, and again, I'm not a coach, I'm not an NRL coach, but and Brad Arthur is. I potentially would have left him in the centre position and maybe put Hayes Dunster onto that wing, just so Bailey could get that combination with Sean Russell out there. I thought that potentially could have been the way to go there, but he named Morgan Harper, who is a new recruit from Manly, start the game. And look, Morgan was pretty solid. He played really well. As I said, scored that first try for the match. He played 80 minutes. He passed the ball to Bailey Simonson after a Bulldogs mistake, and Bailey went in to score. And look, he was pretty solid. A lot of fans have actually probably considered him not the player that they wanted when he signed. But look, he was defensively pretty good. As I said, gave that pass to Bailey and scored that try. So a pretty good debut for Morgan Harper in the centres, and I think he can only grow on that, and I think he'll be back in that centre position for this week. Look, if it was up to me, I probably wouldn't change the team. I'd probably leave it the same it is going into this Penrith game. There's a bit of talk about Wiremu Greg coming back next week. If he comes back, do you put him and Juniors on the bench? Do you put Wiremu as the starting prop? Which one of the bench players do you leave off? Ryan Madison, Joe Offahengawi, Kelma Tuilagi. probably it would, if Brad Arthur was to go that way, I think he'd leave Kilmer out of that side. Kilmer played pretty good. He had 47 minutes played in the game, and look, I think it was a pretty solid debut, I think, for him off the bench. And I was really excited to see him play. And going into this game, he had pretty sort of solid trials coming into it, a new team. So I think I was looking forward to him playing. So I'd be disappointed if he misses out against Penrith, but as I said, I would go for the same team as this week, as this week's team, as they got the win. Why change a winning formula this early on in the season? Yeah, I would probably only make changes if there was suspension, injury, or a form slump. That's why I would change the team, but at the moment, I'd leave it the same it was. Clint Gutherson, look, a lot of people probably didn't say he was one of the probably wouldn't say that he was man of the match. A lot of people are saying that Bryce Cartwright was man of the match, and look, Bryce was really good on report for that tackle. I don't think there'll be anything major to come of that. Scored 2 tries, 2 line breaks. He was pretty effective, and look, but Clint Gutherson, he was a lot of people sort of probably didn't say him as man of the match. And I think the reason that is because Parramatta fans, we probably expect that from Clint Gutherson every single week. He takes the bombs, the Matt Burton bombs that go up that everyone talks about. He didn't drop one of those. He took all of them. Did some runs out of trouble as well. Almost broke through the line at one stage there. He made a little bit of a half break, which was good to see. His short dropouts as well. Parramatta were pretty successful with the short dropouts yesterday in the game against the Bulldogs. They were pretty successful. I think they got the ball back on 2 occasions. And usually I'm not a big fan of the short dropouts, but yesterday it worked okay, and Clint Gutherson is the one who takes the short dropouts, so he's obviously been practicing those. And look, as I said, we probably expect him to do that week in, week out. That's why he's the captain. But that's Clint Gutherson. He probably did a little bit less with Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses on the field there. He's still come up with 179 run meters, so the most run meters for the team. So I think that's a pretty fair effort. And we all saw last year in the last round against Penrith how he went. He was probably the best player on one leg at one stage there against the Panthers, so he'll be looking forward to that battle as well, I am sure. As I said, Joey Lussick just before, top tackler, 29 tackles. I think joint with Jermaine Hopgood as well. Jermaine didn't play that. He had sort of a quiet game in my opinion. Look, don't get me wrong, still a great game, 29 tackles. He did his hit-ups and did a few offloads as well, but he did make a mistake at one point there. But look, that's football. You're going to make mistakes, unfortunately, at some point. Unfortunately for Parramatta yesterday, when we did make mistakes in the back end of the game, the Bulldogs ended up scoring tries. So one to Stephen Crichton, and the other one, one to Stephen Crichton, and the other one to Blake Wilson. So Blake Wilson scored the first one, and Stephen Crichton scored the second one. So look, players are going to make mistakes, and unfortunately for Parramatta, they made the mistakes late in the game, and the Bulldogs scored 2 tries after that. So look, that was probably the disappointing part about the game. I thought it would have been great to keep the Bulldogs to 0, just to show that defence is there against a team that's on the rise, I guess, a little bit. And look, they were always going to be tough. They may not be the super team that and a finals bound team that Parramatta are playing against, like a Penrith, like a Manly, like a Rabbitohs, like a Broncos. They're probably not anything like those teams, but you just never know what sort of Bulldog... Well, you know the Bulldogs teams that play Parramatta are going to turn up, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to beat Parramatta just because of that rivalry and because of that dislike. And look, this being the first game of the year, I thought and that's what the mentality was going into this game as well. So you just don't know what was going on, and for Parramatta to have that good defence in that game, to hold them out for 65 minutes was pretty pleasing. Look, there'll be a few things that they have to work on, like any week in training for this big game against the Panthers, because they won't want to make those mistakes like they did in this game against them, because Penrith will capitalise them, and especially with them coming off a loss against the Melbourne Storm, they'll be fired up to get their first win of the season at home in front of their home fans. So I'm looking forward to that one, as I said, but this is about the Bulldogs game. So look, moving forward, it was great to see the crowd there. Actually, speaking of the crowd, just a little bit of a shout out to the Great Britain Police Rugby League team. Now, they were out here on tour. I think they played the New South Wales Police in a game, but I didn't know. I was looking around and I was seeing all these English Rugby League jerseys. There was a few Wigan jerseys, the Castleford Tigers jersey, there was a couple of Great Britain jerseys as well, and I was thinking, what's going on here? It must be some sort of Great Britain tour, or there's a lot of Englishmen on holidays or something, or that have decided to come to the football, or whether they were Englishmen who lived in Australia and just loved their football. I didn't know what was going on, but then I found out later on, talking to them, that they were part of the Great Britain Rugby League police team. So look, we've all heard about soccer hooligans at soccer games over there in England and the world, but look, these guys were well behaved. They obviously enjoying themselves, having a few drinks, but they were great. They weren't rowdy at all, and I think they really enjoyed the stadium. I think at one point there, I heard one of them say, "This is a great stadium." Probably not as good as atmosphere as one of that over in England. I've never been to a game over there in England, but I have heard even if they have 5,000 people there, it sounds like 15, 20,000, just because of the songs that they sing and the energy they can get out of the energy they can get out of the crowd. It just sounds like a massive crowd. But yeah, so shout out to them, and I hope they enjoyed themselves. I'm not too sure which team they were going for, but I think a couple of them were going for the home team. So that was great to see. So shout out to them as well. I think they're on their way back home now. I think yesterday was their second last day in Australia, and they're back going back home today. So by the time this comes out, or at this time when I'm recording this, they'll probably be on a plane back home. So I hope they really enjoyed their Commbank Stadium experience. So, in wrapping up, a great way for Parramatta to start the year. Obviously a little bit of a concern about Mitchell Moses, but as I said, I think we'll have to stay tuned to the news throughout the week, and I think that he will be right to play on Friday night against the Panthers, 8:05 p.m. at Bluebet Stadium. So we'll just he'll probably have a light week at training, no doubt. Potentially, maybe an injection or two into that groin to get through the game, and which I'm assuming would be pretty painful. I think I heard Joey Johns on the Footy Show this morning saying that he's had multiple operations and ways to try and get rid of a groin injury, and it just lingers around for 18 months or something like that. So let's hope that's not the case for Mitchell, but I'm pretty confident he will play, but you just have to watch this space and see what happens. So that's the next game against Penrith at Bluebet, round 2. And look, as I said, great way for Parramatta to start the season. 1 from 1, third place on the ladder, and confidence must be high. And that's the way they wanted to get the season off to the start of it. And look, as I said, different to last year's season, already different to last year's season by winning the game. So to those that I saw out there at Commbank and said hello, thank you very much. I'll be at Penrith Bluebet Stadium on Friday night. So if you're in and around and you see me around, come and say good day. So I'll be there. Most appreciated for those people who listen to the podcast and recognise myself. And actually, just a quick shout out as well to the USA listeners as well. Had a lot of those over the week as well listening to the podcast. So thank you very much for your support in listening to the podcast, and I really hope that you're enjoying it. Who knows, perhaps the Las Vegas round and people getting interest into rugby league, maybe that's helped podcasters like myself who do a rugby league talk. Maybe that's helped us get a few more American listeners. So thank you very much to those. Also to the English listeners as well. I've got a few of those as well who tune in, week out. So I really appreciate that as well. So coming up this week on the podcast, as I said, I'll have the tipping podcast coming out after Team List Tuesday. Like most people, I didn't do too well this week. I think I was only 3 out of 8, which is not good considering it's both round 0 and round 1, but it's below 50%. So I've always said to win tipping competitions, you need to obviously tip with your head and not your heart, but also you need to get over 50%. You need to be hitting those 5, 6, 7, 8 marks each and every week. So unfortunately I didn't do that this week, but fortunately I'm like most people who got that score as well. If you got more than 3, you are an absolute genius. And for those who got below or got 3 like me or below, then we need to go back to tipping school. But anyway, that'll be coming out after the Team List Tuesday podcast. There'll also hopefully be a game day preview podcast come out on Friday with MG, Mark Geyer, former Penrith legend who I had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully I'm going to get him on the podcast again for a game day preview. He helped me out last year with one, so hopefully we can do that again. Just depends on his schedule. He's a very busy man, MG. So hopefully we can get him on again for that. Also coming out on Thursday, there'll be a fan-related interview podcast with Tom Fowler from Retro Rugby League. So check him out on Instagram. So that'll be out on Thursday. And look, there might be any other breaking news that comes out through the week as well. So there might also be a Sugar and Spice episode as well. I hope you're enjoying that one with the Quick Hands podcast. With George from the Quick Hands podcast. I hope you're really enjoying that. Just a bit of a light-hearted, different look at rugby league throughout the week, the weekly issues. And look, it's probably something that I don't really discuss in too much with in other forums, but it's great to talk to George on the Quick Hands podcast. We have a laugh, we get into the serious issues, and this is just about all rugby league, so in a broader base. So I hope you're really enjoying that one as well. So look, plenty of content coming out on the podcast and also on Instagram as well. If you follow the podcast there, Parracave _podcast, give me a follow on that one. I really appreciate the support. Anyway, that's enough for me. You don't want to hear just me or talking all the time. That's enough for me for tonight, and that was my review of the Parramatta Eels versus the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, round 1 of the NRL season, done and dusted. I'll have another one of these on next week for round 2 against the Penrith Panthers. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. And enjoy your week and enjoy your footy. And go Parra.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Parra Cave Podcast. See you next time.